Welcome to day 66 of trying to become a SOC analyst. Just wanted to do a quick summary of yesterday's alert because I got it tagged as the wrong answer, and the reason was that I selected it as a true positive. I was a bit confused to why that was the case. It wasn't until after that I started to think about it and realised it was actually quite a good lesson. It was a legitimate LFI abuse attempt. They tried to get etc. password using LFI, and it was from a malicious IP, but it was not successful because our server was not vulnerable to the LFI abuse. But normally, if I had a ticket that said, possible local file exclusion attempt or local file inclusion attempt, it would still be a true positive, because just because they weren't successful doesn't mean that it wasn't a true positive. But the thing that I guess this lesson was trying to teach us was the actual rule heading, and the rule heading was successful local file inclusion. So this particular case was a legitimate LFI attempt, but because our server applied 404, it was not a successful LFI. And I think that was the lesson, that this rule is specifically set up to find successful LFIs. So in that case, it was not a true positive because it was flagging an attempted LFI as successful, and that's why it was a false positive. So that was actually quite a good lesson, and it wasn't until afterwards that I realised that was what the lesson was about. So I just thought I'd go over that because I did think it was interesting. So for today, go to investigation channel. This is the same alert as what we were dealing with yesterday. It's on the same server. It's SOC 128, malicious file upload attempt. And the date's Feb 22nd. So in yesterday's ticket, I was a bit confused about the time too. There was a logs showing a shell command uploaded. Okay, so it's on the gitServer. It's been flagged phpshell.php. We've got a file hash. We've also got given a download link. So let's download that. Okay. So I feel like we sort of semi-investigated this yesterday with the LFI alert, but let's jump in and see what we can figure out with this one. So 752. Just unzip it. So we've got the phpshell.php. Before we have a look at that, just because we saw this in the log, well, I saw this in the logs yesterday. In fact, the logs are still up from yesterday, so that's convenient. We've got, this is the case we were looking at yesterday, which was the LFI. I mean, I don't want to re-go over it, but it's just interesting that it was all part of the same case. So this was the LFI attempt, and then we got the 404, and okay, that was that. But then in investigating that, we also saw these time frames of Feb 22. And if we look closer at those, we've got the upload.php, which was allowed. That's the wrong date. 22nd. We've got PHP shell command equals whoami. Get etc. password. Okay, and they're the other dates. So that's what we're trying to look for. So they've obviously uploaded something, and the upload is the file that we just unzipped. So now that we see the context, let's have a look at what the cat PHP shell is. So if we have a look at it, it's your standard PHP command shell. So you're able to issue commands to the server via that. So we do know it's going to be malicious. We can also, we've been given a hash. There should be a VirusTotal around here somewhere. That was the IP as well from yesterday, so that's convenient. So PHP code checks for the presence of command parameter in the request. If the parameter is present, the code executes the value of this parameter as a system config using the system function. The output of the command is displayed within the pre-tags. The script then terminates using die. So it is your basic command shell. So the next thing you could do is you can use it to cat etc password, but then you could also use that same command to get a reverse shell. So you could use like netcat to reverse back to your IP, open up a listener and get access that way. So very malicious. This is the IP that we're dealing with from the log. This hasn't flagged the remote IP. The IP is here, 492. Again, as I said, I just investigated this previous ticket, so a lot of the data's already loaded up. So this is the abuse IP. We know it's a geo-based IP in China, and it's been flagged as abusive for brute force and SSH brute forcing. We know that the shell script that was uploaded is malicious, and it's been flagged as allowed, and we know that they requested with that command shell whoami command to see what access they had and get etc password. That's going to be a proof of concept, because the next thing you can do is, once you know it works, is do a netcat back to your IP, and then you can get access to the box. So on the endpoint, can we search for gitServer? Yep. Let's see what commands, if any, have been run. So terminal history. So we saw that whoami command. We saw the cat etc password. So the commands are being issued. And then it looks like potentially more. Oh no, those dates don't match up with our ticket. So our ticket ends with just these commands here, these last two, the whoami and the cat etc password. So let's contain the machine. Let's open up our ticket. Sorry, I feel like if you haven't watched the previous video, you might feel like I'm rushing through this, but because we had just saw this, it all seems pretty straightforward, because I investigated it yesterday. It's not there's no outgoing connections yet, so we're going to go with other for that. It's not been quarantined. We looked at the script, it is malicious. We looked at the IP and it's malicious. Again, malicious. Oh, this is accessed, yes. Containment we've already done. So we want to put it in our artifacts. So we had the hash of the PHP shell. So that was the hash. PHP shell. We had a malicious IP. which was the China geo-based IP. And the URL that they were taking advantage of, which was the PHP shell. In fact, I would also like to include the upload endpoint, because that's obviously allowing them to upload the command shell, so that's the more important. And we'll put that as entry point. Okay, so we've got our hashes. Yep, okay. I'll pause the video, I'll write up my notes. Okay, so I've written up my notes. We've mapped it to exploit public facing application, web shell, command scripting interpreter. Tried to log in the 5W style. We've got who, an external attacker, exploited the web server hosted on gitServer. The malicious activity targeted the web application upload functionality and resulted in the execution of commands through a web shell. What? The alert SOC128 malicious file upload attempt triggered after a malicious PHP file named phpshell, we've got the hash, was uploaded to the server through the endpoint source code upload. The uploaded file contained a PHP shell capable of executing system commands provided through the CMD perimeter. HTTP logs confirm the attacker accessed the uploaded web shell and executed commands such as whoami and cat etc. passwd, demonstrating successful remote code execution on the server. VirusTotal confirmed the file hash is malicious and the script content matches a typical PHP command shell. When, we've got the timestamp, where, source, hostname, gitServer, source IP, we've got the internal 172 address. Compromised endpoint was that source code upload.php. The malicious web shell was the PHP shell. Command execution request, and that was an example of the whoami. Why? The target of the alert was triggered due to detection of a malicious file upload to the web server. Investigation confirmed the attacker successfully uploaded and executed a PHP web shell, which allowed arbitrary command code on the host. Endpoint logs confirmed commands being executed through the web shell, confirming the system compromised. The affected endpoint was isolated to contain the incident and prevent further attacker activity. So let's confirm that and close our alert. We'll say it was a true positive and close, and just make sure I did tick contain. I did. And this is the reference I was talking about yesterday. This is the ticket from yesterday, and now we've got the next. Interestingly, no, that's our results. Those red false positives that seem to auto load really freak me out. So we got everything correct. It was a true positive. It was malicious. It was accessed and it had not been cleaned. So got some redemption today. A bit of an easy one just because I felt like I spent 5 minutes looking at those logs yesterday when we were dealing with the LFI, and it was just a bit of a fluke today that I saw the ticket and thought, oh, that looks interesting, and I clicked on it. It was the gitServer one. So alright, I'll see you on day 67.